It's 8 o'clock sharp or something else, depending on where you are in the world, and it's time to kick off our webinar for today with the topic of invoice automation for IFS supplier invoice workflow users. Very happy to be here, and I'm co-hosting this webinar today with some colleagues from the IFS world, Minna, and we also have Magnus Ingram here as well, who agreed to join us just a couple of days ago, but we didn't really have time to update the first slide for the presentation. Would you guys like to say good morning and perhaps introduce yourselves to people who don't know who you are? There are some on the line as well.
Yes, okay, I can start for those who do not know me yet. So my name is Minna Ingram, and I'm taking care of the Finnish IFS user group, IFSiders.
And good morning, I am Magnus Ingram. I'm the operational manager of the IFS Scandinavian user group, IFS Användarförening, IFS Brukerförening. Just briefly, we started 17 years ago, and we are independent from IFS, and we are run by IFS customers in Scandinavia. And we have a range throughout the years, maybe more than 130 or even more than that, activities, usually 8 to 10 each year. And I'm happy that so many of our members are here today joining this webinar, which seems to be very interesting. So I'm looking forward to learn about AI and how it can be used in invoice automation.
And if there are any people out there who are using IFS or are planning on implementing IFS and you're not a member of either the Finnish user group or Magnus Scandinavian user group, please contact these people and make sure that you will be a member, because that's a very valuable user group with lots of tips and tricks to help you navigate the IFS world.
Yes, and please use the chat function or questions function during this webinar, so it wouldn't be just we who are talking. So we hope that you are also asking all the questions when there's something you want to ask from the presenters. So I think you all should see a function there on the right side with questions. So they are for you to just send those questions when you have something. So we try to answer as good as we can.
Yeah, and if we don't have time to answer during this call, then we'll answer in writing afterwards, and everyone will get the responses. I think it's time to kick things off. Well, I'm hosting this on Snowfox side. My name is Niko Kyte. I work as a sales executive for the Nordic sales team, and my boss Tuomas Haapsaari is in the background, making sure that everything works correctly, and he will notify me if there are any very interesting questions that pops up which I might not react to. But as I said, please don't be offended if you won't get the response today. You will get it later. But there's a lot of people, 62 people online. Wow, this is great. Such a good turnout for this webinar. We're really happy for this. So let's kick things off, and we'll try to squeeze this webinar into 45 minutes, so there will be time for questions as well, and you might see the end of the men's classic 15-kilometer race in Beijing if we're lucky. I'm going to watch it afterwards, so please don't spoil anything in the chat. So we're going to discuss a few topics today about invoice automation in general. What pain points are we solving with the AI technology, and what does AI actually bring to the process? What's the role of AI in invoice automation, and how our AI connects with IFS supplier invoice workflow. Then we're going to briefly discuss a bit on how you analyze the success of the AI automation. I'm going to mention a couple of customers who are using our service with good results, and then we're going to discuss your potential business case for the AI solution. And also we're taking a little glimpse into basically the cost structure of our AI. And we're not trying to do like an aggressive sales pitch here. If you are interested in discussing this further, you are very welcome to connecting with us after the meeting, but we're here as guests. So about invoice automation in general, one question which you might want to ask yourself, especially if you're working in the finance department of your company, is what's your current invoice automation level? And this is something which you should know, and this is something which your CFO might be very interested in. And another way of looking at this topic is to ask yourself, how much time does invoice handling take place? How much time do you spend in managing invoices every day in your company? So people who work in the finance department and people who work on the business side. There's a division of labor often between these two. Accounts payable might do some posting and send the invoice for the approval flow, or they simply send the invoice to the correct reviewer, who then posts the invoice and sends it to their manager for approval. So these are the topics which are in the mind of many finance professionals in companies nowadays, and we're trying to help them with these questions. So you have different types of invoices, obviously, in any company, and you're typically able to match many of these invoices using some sort of a rule-based automation. The most common is, at least when I looked at the companies who are online today, I would say that a typical way of automating invoices is PO matching, meaning you send a purchase order to the supplier, they deliver the goods, you do a goods receivable, the invoice arrives, and it matches, or at least it should match. And that's pretty common, of course. Then sometimes accounts payable systems, they provide you with contract matching possibilities, meaning you get a phone bill or a bill for the rent, or the car leasing or something else, which is repeated every month with the same amounts and the same details on the invoice. And these are fairly simple to automate using rule-based automation. And then, of course, there are coding templates, which means that there is some reference information in the invoice, which then triggers a coding template, and the invoice gets the correct coding rows and the correct reviewer. So these are some of the typical scenarios which we encounter when we discuss with customers, and I believe many of you can relate. But when we discuss non-PO invoice automation, that's typically pretty low. We see that customers have between 10 and 25% of non-PO invoice automation in their accounts payable setups. And this is because it's pretty dynamic, and there's a long tail of suppliers who sends invoices. Some of these, they send just 1 or 2 invoices on an annual basis. Some send more frequently, but the content of the invoice might differ from month to month, especially in a dynamic environment where you might have completely different types of services bought during the summer and the winter. So in the winter, you have let's say a building construction, somebody's dropping snow off the rooftops, and in the summer, the same company, the same supplier might be cutting your grass. So this means that it's pretty hard to automate these types of invoices using conventional rule-based methods. There's just so much variables there. So what this means, let's have an example. If you have around 100,000 invoices on an annual basis, you have, out of those invoices, 45,000 are PO-based invoices, meaning you have, or at least should have, a proper PO match for these invoices. Then you have 10,000 contract-based invoices, which recurs regularly with the same amounts and everything. That leaves you with 45,000 invoices, which are more or less handled manually. And that's quite a lot, because if you multiply that with the amount of time spent per invoice, it amounts up to a lot of hours. If you use 10 to 15 minutes per invoice, with 45,000 invoices, that's at least 7,500 hours per year. That's more than 4 FTEs, just for invoice posting, reviewing, and approval. And it's that's not very good. It's a complete waste of time and time for both accounts payable and the business side. And this leads to other things as well, obviously. It means longer circulation times because people tend not to manage their invoices that properly when there's a lot of manual stuff to be done. That's something which you do when you have the time for it, and that means that the circulation times are pretty long, and you get late payment fees. And a couple of years ago, I actually performed I analyzed the spend of this big educational institution in Finland. They have a lot of campuses all over the southern Finland, and one of their main suppliers from a spend perspective was the local energy company providing heating and ström, electric. Well, anyways, so they paid 75,000 euros on annual basis for 2 campuses for heating and electricity. And on top of that, they paid 15,000 euros per year in late payment fees. So that's 20% extra just in late payment fees, just for one supplier. And if that was a company, of course, this is, it's a public entity, so it's taxpayer money. But if it was a company, it's owner's money, basically. It's less profit for the company, 20,000 euros less profit every year just for one supplier. And if that happens often and it touches many categories, it amounts to a lot of money. And I bet your CFO would be really interested in having those late payment fees completely removed from the equation. Another thing it leads to is missed cash discounts. And in many businesses today and in many countries, cash discounts are regularly used, meaning the supplier sends you an invoice and you have agreed that if you pay within 7 days of issuing the invoice, you get 3% discount. And you can hook up many suppliers in this type of program. So if you, for example, would have 1 million in spend within the cash discount program, that's a potential of 30,000 euros on annual basis for savings if you pay on time. And obviously this is something which you would talk with your treasury department, and it depends on your cash position and inflation and everything. But still, there's always there will always be windows of opportunity where this is a very good strategic method of saving money, getting kickbacks. So that's something to consider as well. And then for all your controllers out there, if you have inconsistency in postings, which you often do in non-PO invoice management, it means that you have poor reporting quality. And I do not need to tell you why this is important, because you know it far better than me. And then one final point, if you have outsourced your accounts payable process, manual coding is really expensive. So many BPO companies, they have certain fee for each invoice, and if they need to type in manually anything, then that there's a surcharge. That's pretty common. So if you're able to automate your invoice management, that means that you would be paying less for your BPO company. If the BPO company says that no way, you're still going to pay us exactly the same, then you should consider changing the BPO. But many BPOs are introducing artificial intelligence to help out with managing the invoices and automating the invoices. Sometimes this leads to smaller fees for the customer, and sometimes they reap the benefits. So we think that it's up to the customer to also consider these things. So the main question here is, are these questions relevant to you as a listener? There's 70 people still online, nobody has dropped off, so I think that this is quite relevant to many of you listening in. Magnus or Minna, do you have any comments or thoughts thus far?
No, go ahead with your presentation, and I also encourage everyone to use the chat function to write in questions to Nico or to Minna.
Yes, definitely. Please use the chat feature or the questions feature. We have time for questions. Well, let's move on with the show then. So we believe that AI is, we know that AI is a game changer. We've seen this 100 times over. AI is a very, very good tool for automating different kinds of business processes, and for invoice automation in particular, this is probably the most effective solution which you can use, especially when it comes to non-PO invoices. And let's discuss this a bit further, shall we? So in a nutshell, what the capabilities of AI is for non-PO invoice automation. So at least what we do is we automatically code your invoices, meaning if there's one or several coding rows, we can use AI to give the correct GL account, cost center, VAT, project, internal order. However long your posting string is, we can pull it off. Another thing which we do with the AI is predicting the reviewer and approver of your invoices. And a third main element of our set of tools is data fetching from invoice images or from the XML. And typically this is PO numbers. So you might have a lot of invoices which should match with the goods receivable, and the supplier may have typed in the PO number on the invoice, but for some reason in the OCR conversion it doesn't convert into the final version of the structured invoice file which you import into your accounts payable flow. So we help out here. Our text analytics tool converts basically the image into a long string of text, and then it starts to look for relevant information. So we can enable it to sharpshoot some certain pieces of information there, like PO numbers. If they are perhaps mistyped a little bit by the supplier, it can correct it, and then it stores it in the correct field in the invoice file. So when it hits your invoice workflow, it matches with the goods receivable. But this text analytics tool it's basically used for improving our own AI-based non-PO predictions, but it can be used for that as well, and it's very commonly used for sharpshooting reference information from invoices. And then obviously you need to see and you need to know and understand what the AI does. So there is an analytics tool. I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of some dashboard images we have there. And that helps you follow up on what the AI does, what the rate of automation is, how it develops over time, what are the most commonly used posting dimensions, which are less used, and also on an invoice level, how many posting dimensions did we predict correctly. And why that is important, I will tell you in a little bit. Let's see, there are no, I can't at least, has authorized, there's a question, let's see. How many you have? I think this is more a question for IFS. I'm a new IFS user. Can I study somewhere and where, how long it takes to handle one invoice, and who has authorized and approved the invoice? Yeah, so probably the person asking this question needs to at least get the hold on some documentation on how to use supplier invoice workflow and track and trace. So I will forward this question to Magnus and Minna. Maybe you can get an answer in writing to the asker.
Yes, we can provide a contact person within IFS. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's move forward then with the show. So why is it that we do what we do? As I said earlier, 10 to 25% of invoices, non-PO invoices, are typically automated by the system itself. So manually handled invoices make up the majority of these non-PO invoices, and this is where we come in with the AI. So we use artificial intelligence to automate the posting and approval flow of all those invoices which are today handled manually. And well, not all, because we are able to today we're able to predict successfully on average 90% of posting dimensions and approval flow. And when I started, it was 85%, so it keeps on getting better and better, but we cannot promise 100%. But 90% is pretty good. But since we're a value-adding service provider, you are able to continue developing existing automation in your workflow tool. So if you are planning on implementing new automation features into your invoice workflow solution, that's fine, because we only take care of the rest. We take care of those invoices which are handled manually, and that means that you will be paying us less if you increase your own automation. So our business model is value-based. So for each transaction we successfully predict, we're allowed to invoice the customer. And that's a fair game, because we need to earn your business. And this keeps us on our toes as well, improving the solution, improving customer setups, always improves automation, which means there's more money for us, and that's a really fair game, and that's we believe that this is the 20th century way of doing things. So I was thinking about showing you next how the AI actually does its tricks. Do you have any questions or comments at this point? There's another question. Well, that's a long question. All right. There is a question about from one customer who tested Snowfox last year. We did a trial for them last year, and yes, it's about how to test the AI. We have capability of testing the AI. I'm going to discuss that briefly, and to you, Tommy, who's asking this question, I will respond. I'll give you a response in writing after the meeting. We have a contact person for you at IFS who can solve that issue. But let's move forward then. So before we go into how we do it, here's an example of a reason why we do it. So a big company in Finland, Realia Group, implemented our solution last year, and it significantly decrease the amount of manual labor of purchase invoice management. And the results arrived immediately after implementing the solution. And that means that when we implement the AI to your workflow, you will immediately achieve a really, really high level of automation from the first day. And that's the whole point of this. You don't need to configure and teach and test and do all that for several months in a row just to get some results, but they are visible from day one. And then it continues to develop over time. So how we do it? Let's move forward. So Snowfox learns from historic invoice data. And this means that you don't need to create any rules for managing these invoices. The Snowfox does it on its own. So what we first do when we kick things off, we feed the AI with your historic invoice and posting data, meaning original invoices as they have been received by your e-invoice service provider or scanning service provider, converted and sent to your invoice workflow. And then the posting data, meaning how your invoices have been posted and reviewed by your accounts payable and business people. Basically, the final versions of the same invoices. That's typically a CSV file or something. Everything is fed into AI, which then starts to create an AI model for you. And it takes each individual invoice which it receives and looks how it has been posted and reviewed. And when it looks at the original invoice, it looks both at the IFS invoice, the XML version, but also the image version, the PDF copy or the scanned version of the invoice. And it looks for you don't need to teach it to look for anything specifically, but it learns by looking at all the content of the invoice and comparing it to how the invoice has been coded and reviewed and approved. And it does this for each and every invoice multiple times over until it learns the patterns on its own, completely autonomic. And when it's done, we connect it with your accounts payable workflow, and it starts to generate posting and routing prediction based on your historic invoice and posting data. And for each individual invoice that then comes in, it types directly the posting information into the invoice file and sends it to your workflow. It's imported by the invoice workflow, and then it gets final postings and approval flow in the actual invoice workflow solution which you use. Now, at this point, if the AI has made an error or it's left perhaps some dimension empty, so it hasn't fulfilled, for example, the project number or cost center, at point number 4, your users, meaning your AP people or your business users, they fill in the rest. Once the invoice is approved, it goes to the general ledger, and of course your suppliers get paid. At that point, we receive the copy of the information back to the AI, and this is how the AI learns from final postings, and it updates the model with the new information. And this is how it gets stronger over time. It gets smarter, it gets more data, and the first 12 months is the strongest growth period for the AI. It's like with a puppy. If you buy a puppy, the first 12 months it grows and it gets smarter, and it just saw a dog outside the door, so that reminded me of this example. But that's the first 12 months is as I said, it's the strongest growth period. After that, the growth continues, it levels off a bit, but it still continues. And everything that happens in the AI is obviously reported in the analytics tool. So there's the real-time analytics tool, which you have access to, and your professional users can follow up on how things progress. but that's the only user interface we provide you with. This is a headless solution, meaning that you don't need to have a separate workflow tool to manage your daily invoices. Everything we do happens in the background, and the results are visible when you use your workflow tool. So the invoices show up with the posting information already there. We also give comments. So we use the comment field to explain what the confidence value of our postings are. And I will talk to you about confidence values just in a few slides. So let's not stick to that yet. Before we go and look how we connect with IFS, I want to see if there are any new questions, or does Minna or Magnus have any questions or comments at this point?
No, please continue.
All right. There's a question about confidence. Well, that's great, because I'm going to talk about confidence in just a couple of slides. So how we connect with IFS supplier invoice workflow is using SFTP connections. So your supplier in step 1 sends an invoice. It's received by your invoice receiving service provider. You can get invoices, or you can get scanned invoices, PDF invoices, stuff like that. Now at this point, I want to highlight that the invoices we manage, they need to be digitized. So that means that you need to have them scanned by a proper tool which generates the IFS invoice which we work on then. And we know that many of the businesses who are listening to us are using Pagero, so we have very good experience in the Pagero IFS environment, but it can be someone else too. It doesn't necessarily have to be Pagero. Well, anyways, the invoice receiving service provider establishes the IFS invoice, which nowadays is imported directly into the supplier invoice workflow. But when you implement Snowfox, we grab a hold of that invoice before it goes to IFS, and we enrichen the invoice with our predictions. So we type in the coding rows and the approval flow into the invoice, and then we forward it to supplier invoice workflow, where it hits the workflow, and it gets the final postings in the invoice approval process. And once the invoices are done, we get the feedback back to Snowfox on how the final postings were performed. So if there are any changes there, then Snowfox learns and adapts. And obviously everything, as I said, is followed up in the analytics department. That's about the architecture on a high level, very high level. So of course, who's responsible of the SFTP connections and so on. That's always customer specific, who picks up and who delivers. This is something which we can solve directly with the customers. Let's not go into that. But any questions about the trials? Sorry, not the trial, but the setup from an architecture perspective at this point? All right. Moving on. So just a short example of how an invoice would look like when we give the predictions. So we use the fields which are already available in the invoice XML, and there's some reserved field for account, for example, and we use that for predicting the GL account, and then other line items, they're visible here. So we type in directly the dimension predictions here using semicolon as the delimiter, and then we give the comment here. And there was a question about the confidence levels here. So in the comment field, we will type in the how confident Snowfox is of its own predictions. So here, for example, it has decided that it's at least 90% sure of this account, and it's 80 to 89% sure that this is the correct activity. Cost center 80 to 89% as well. So you as a customer can decide how confident Snowfox needs to be in order for us to type in the prediction into the invoice row. So if you decide that Snowfox has to be at least 80% sure that the prediction is correct, and this can be decided on a dimension level. And if in that case, if Snowfox is 75% sure that it has predicted the correct cost center, we're not allowed to type that information into the actual invoice row. We're not allowed to populate this part of the invoice, but we are allowed to populate the comment section. And that means that you as a user can then decide that what is the correct cost center. So we give you a recommendation, you choose the correct cost center, and then when the invoice is finalized, we get the feedback, and then we see if that prediction was correct. But we're still not allowed to invoice you for that prediction unless it was populated into the invoice row itself. But since we get new data in, we get feedback, the AI evolves and learns. At some point, we will reach that 80% mark, and then we start typing in the prediction in the coding row as well. So that's how it works with the confidence levels, and in different companies, in different customers, the thresholds are a bit different. Some want to have a really tight and high threshold that we're not allowed to send or populate the rows unless we're at least 80% sure. That's a pretty high threshold, but it comes down to where you want the control to be. So if your business users are the ones posting or coding the invoices, then often finance professionals want to have a high threshold, because if there is even a small risk of us giving wrong predictions, the business users, they typically don't care. The invoice comes in, if it has been pre-posted by us, they just press OK and send it forward. And if there are any incorrect predictions, then they stick. And that's not something the finance people want to see. Also, if we make an incorrect prediction and the business user notices that it's an incorrect prediction, they will blame the finance professionals. So this is why finance people, they tend to want to have a high threshold for those postings which previously was performed by the business users. But then after a while, when we see that everything looks good and the predictions which had perhaps a lower confidence value, even they are correct, then you might lower the threshold, and we start posting more predictions into the invoice. And these changes can be done in real time just by informing us. So it's really easy to manage the configuration of the AI from this perspective. Magnus, Minna, do you have any questions about the confidence levels?
No, I think you explained it loud and clear. So,
all right,
please continue.
Let's move on then. So, analytics part, we want to show what's going on with the AI, and for this we have developed an analytics tool which contains a lot of dashboards which are easy to use and accessible. And in this example, this is from our mother company, Bravida Group, and as you can see, we are hitting a 90% mark on almost all of the dimensions here, meaning that the red ones are wrong. So most predictions are correct correct when it comes to our mother company. And as I said, our average success rate per posting dimension in general is around 90% nowadays. And then you can also see how the automation develops over time. This is the routing statistics. So this is the reviewer and approval flow combined. That's how it's done in our system. And you can see that from January onwards to March, it has grown from around 80% to 95%. It dropped a bit here in the beginning of the year, and then it continued, and it started to grow strongly. And here is an example of a couple of invoices which we have predicted. These are all individual invoices. As you can see, they have their own invoice numbers here, and different suppliers, and there are the actual predictions which we made. So all the correct ones, the green ones, are the ones we're allowed to invoice for, and the red ones are incorrect, and we're not allowed to invoice of those predictions. There's a lot more stuff in the analytics department which can be used, but this is just a brief sample, and we continue to develop it. We use Google Cloud Studio to provide customers with the analytics, and Google is our hosting partner in general for this service. So we use Google Cloud, and our data centers are located in Minna, Finland, and the backups are somewhere in the European Union. But Google hasn't provided us with any AI algorithms. All the AI algorithms which we use are developed in-house. And why this matters is because we don't need to compromise. So if the customers, they need something, we noticed that the product has to take a certain direction to better serve our client base, then we can develop it without having to ask a third party to help us out. So everything which we do is in-house, and that benefits the customers. So we have still 17 minutes, and we're almost at the end of the show. Some customer examples. The first one which I want to show is Mehiläinen, and this is a really big company in the private healthcare sector in Finland. They have also established themselves in Sweden, Estonia, and Germany over the last year. And they've been with us for a long time. They manage around 300,000 invoices on an annual basis. And when we started, the level of automation was 25%. Nowadays, the level of posting automation, meaning correct predicted posting dimensions, is 85%. And for routing, meaning correct reviewer and approver, is around 90%. And one thing which surprised us a bit was that they had noticed that since nearly all of the invoices are posted automatically by us, the job performed by controllers at the end of the month is a lot easier from a reporting perspective, since most invoices have the most posting dimensions in place. So you can extract the data as a report for your month-end tasks, even if the invoices hasn't been approved, but at least you have the posting information there. So that was really important for them, and we didn't even understand this. This has a great value to customers until they told us. So we didn't really understand that this is a key selling point, but obviously it is. Then there's a couple of other customers as well. Well, Bravido. This is our mother company, and the first business using Snowfox ever. And Snowfox was actually established as an internal project originally back in 2017. The guy on the picture, Pasi Vilhunen, he was fed up with us having a level of automation of 5% for invoice automation. And he said, set up a task force to automate these invoices using AI. And why AI was chosen was because we have in the group we have a lot of companies who are working in a staffing business, and they recruit around 30,000 people on an annual basis for our customers or their customers. And the best way to combine the correct people with the correct businesses is using AI. So there was already AI technology in the house, and there was knowledge and there was a willingness to investigate this further. So they developed an AI to automate invoices. So back in 2017, this was done, and the results were so good that in 2018 they decided that we had to establish a company called Snowfox, which took over the IPRs to the software and continued to develop it to other markets as well. And this is where we are now, 4 years later, and now we are working with 16 different accounts payable systems, including IFS supplier invoice workflow. So that's a brief background on our company as well. Well, then we got a nice quote from one of our latest customers, Verso Wood. And why I picked Verso Wood is because we have a vast scope of different types of customers using the solution. So there's no line of business which wouldn't be using us today. And Verso Wood is a company specialized in developing, or they sell wood products to constructions, and you can well, basically you can fix up your house with Verso Wood stuff. So they're a global player, and from a non-PO invoice management in this kind of an environment, there's a lot of different types of invoices which needs to be managed. So this is why it's interesting to see that a company like Verso Wood got very, very good experiences from an AI tool. So then, what this would look like in your environment? How much could your company benefit from the AI? And Magnus asked that I would discuss the pricing a bit. I'm going to spend a few minutes here, and just to talk you through the logic of how we invoice our customers. And the main thing here is full visibility, and the other main thing here is that you pay for the success. So always when you kick things off, there's a startup cost to implement the service. It's typically very reasonable. We're talking about under 4,000 to 6,000 euros, depending on how many countries, how many business units you have, how complex your landscape is, and maybe if you need to set up multiple AI models, if you have a lot of different chart of accounts for different companies and so on. But still very reasonable, and the implementation is done very quickly. Then there's a reasonable annual maintenance fee that includes support and customer success. And this is a cloud service, and obviously we take care of the version updates and all of that. And on the customer success side, we provide all our customers with a named customer success manager, and their job is to ensure that you have a high level of automation. And this means also that if any changes needed to take place, you need to deploy this to new countries, you want to include new companies, there's a change in the chart of accounts or anything else, we do not charge you any daily or hourly rates of our consultancy work when we are live with the solution. And this is because point number 3, transaction fees. So we want to ensure that you have successful transactions and we get enough volumes. So we charge for each prediction which is successful a small fee, and if we succeed, then if you succeed, we succeed, and we need to earn your business. And you do not need to commit on an annual basis, so you can you can implement the solution, and if you are for some reason unhappy, nobody has been so far, you can terminate the agreement with a 4-month notice period. So that's how much we trust this service ourselves. 10 minutes left, final slides coming up. I'm going to, before we go to the final slide, I want to see if there are questions. I'm really bad at using this question tool here. I'm sorry about that, but let's just see if anything has popped up.
Nico, maybe we can answer those questions later.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Through email or so.
Yeah, let's do that. So I talked you through the pricing logic, but in order for us to tell you how much it would cost for you is to conduct a free trial, and we do this with every customer. And that means that we set up the AI with your own invoice data. We need 3 to 6 months of historic invoices and related coding and posting information. The data is sent to us, and we feed the AI with your data. We use 70% of the test data you provide us with to train the AI. Well, AI trains itself, so we don't really need to do all that much. But once the AI has established a working model, then we feed in 30% of your test invoices as new invoices without the posting and approval information. And the job for the AI is to predict the coding rows and the approval row for those invoices, and then compare our predictions with actual postings and approvals of those same invoices. And that's how you see what the expected outcome of Snowfox is. That's how you see what your potential for using artificial intelligence is. And that's also our business case. And then when we see the results, we multiply that with the transaction fees, and that's pretty much what you would be paying for the Snowfox service. If you're happy with the trial results and happy with the commercial part of everything, then we sign an agreement and implement the service. It takes 3 to 4 weeks to implement it. It's pretty fast. Of course, if you want some additional services, it might take a bit longer, but 3 to 4 weeks is pretty much the standard time for our implementation. Once you're live, then we start to charge you for the predictions. So that's I think this is a very fair way of presenting the business case to the customer, because we use your data, your information to set this up and to review what the potential is. So there's no theoretical charges hidden there. So if any questions from Magnus or Minna, or maybe something in the chat or question department. Well, I'll dig into this test part just a little bit. So as I said, we need 3 to 12 months worth of historic invoice with related coding data, and this you can get by requesting the posting and approval data from your IFS consultant, or if you can extract that data on your own, that also works. It's just a simple CSV file. We need to see the original invoice number and how it has been coded and reviewed and approved. And also if there are multiple lines, then all those lines as well. Then the original invoices can be requested from your OCR or e-invoice partner. Unless you have them stored somewhere, that would be great. But if not, typically you can request this information from your service provider. So it's a couple of data sets, pretty simple to come by, and then you send us these using SFTP, and then we conduct the trial. There, still have 5 minutes to spare. We're happy to give you back some of your time, but at this point we can take a look if there are any questions perhaps online, or if Magnus or Minna has any comments or questions.
I'm not able to see the questions from the participants, unfortunately. So.
Okay. I am, but for some reason I am very bad at using this thing, but we will have the answers in writing.
Yes, and you will send out a link to this recording?
Obviously, you will get the link to this recording, and after this recording has ended, you will get the survey of the trial, basically asking if you're interested in performing the trial. If you are, we'll send you detailed instructions on what we need, and also how to get them, how to get that information, what to ask for, and before we do any trials, we always sign an NDA. Obviously that's a standard business procedure. Okay, so that was the main presentation there. We got some good questions. We hope to get some more. You can always ask me there. You can see my contact details there, and please reach out using your mail or preferably LinkedIn. I like to connect with people, of course, and check out our Snowfox profile also on LinkedIn to follow up on news, what happens in the AI world for accounts payable professionals.
Yes, and perhaps you could compile the questions and answer and send to everyone, so we all can
Obviously.
share.
Yes, we will share the questions and the answers as well.
Great.
Yes. Yeah. But thank you, Nico. It was really interesting to listen to what you told us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your members, and we have very good experiences working with IFS, and I'm really looking forward to discussing with IFS users about this opportunity.